Let's welcome our speaker today, Patricia Stoneking.
Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you. The first thing I want to tell you about is HB 2052, and that is commonly known as the Public Building Security Act. And what this bill does, we called it the Mega Gun Bill. It's the first omnibus gun bill we've ever had in Kansas, because we had about 8 separate bills on the table, and some of the legislators said, you know, that's going to take a lot to work all those bills. And I said, well, can we just dump them all together? And they said, yeah, we can do that. So we got this mega gun bill. And in this mega gun bill, it did a number of things. One of the things it did, which most concealed carry permit holders are most interested in, and that is the fact that it decriminalized the no carry signs. So if you go in a building, and this is all effective July 1st, if you go in a building that's posted with that victim-rich gun-free zone sign, as I call it, then it's no longer a criminal commission of a crime to accidentally not see that sign. The worst thing that can happen is they can ask you to leave. And that's a really good thing. We don't believe there should be any gun-free zones. Those are victim-rich zones, and it's been evidenced by every shooting that's taken place everywhere in this country have all taken place in a gun-free zone. Some of you may not know that the Aurora movie theater shooter drove by 2 unposted theaters to a 3rd theater much farther from his home that was posted, because he knew he would not be met with opposition when he went in there to commit such a heinous crime. Another thing that this bill did, and probably the thing that's getting the most notoriety, is it said all public buildings must take down the gun-free zone signs unless they provide adequate security. And that adequate security is defined in the bill. Armed guards, metal detectors, basically an assurance that no one can come in to that building with a gun. You know, it's interesting, this applies to college campuses, and it's interesting, and I'm talking to some of the folks on college campuses, what they don't realize is there are already guns on campus. So how about we make sure we're doing that in a more controlled fashion? So right now, it's my understanding the Board of Regents is discussing what to do. They obviously cannot secure every entrance to every building on a college campus. And they know that they are probably going to have to start allowing concealed carry on campus. My message regarding that is simple. These are folks who have been through their training classes, who are responsible individuals, who are 21 years old. That's not going to be the majority of students. We believe it's actually going to be less than 1%. But we want the professors to be armed. We want the teachers to be able to be armed. Is every real possibility that someone who is armed can stop an active shooter in a situation on a campus? We also are seeing different neighborhoods, communities, developing training programs for teachers for the K through 12. Now, the other bill that was probably most controversial, and the bill which got us attention from Eric Holder, was called the Second Amendment Protection Act. And the Second Amendment Protection Act is a 2-part bill. The first part of the bill is commonly known as what we call a Firearms Freedom Act. And it was first passed by Montana in 2009. And I've actually been trying to get this passed since the first session was 2010. And we did pass it in the House in 2010. Unfortunately, we were unable to get it through the Senate. We did so again in 2011. We did so again in 2012. But this was to be the year. Each year, we found ways to strengthen that bill. And what that firearms freedom protection portion of the bill says is if the gun is made in Kansas and kept within the confines of Kansas, that it cannot be regulated by the federal government. The second portion of that bill is what we call a Second Amendment protection or Second Amendment preservation language. And it says any gun owned in Kansas is protected by the sovereignty of Kansas, that we will not comply with registration, confiscation, or UN treaties. There are over 30,000 laws on the books in this country, gun laws, that restrict your rights. Not one of those laws has ever prevented someone who is mentally ill or just plain evil from perpetrating a crime with a firearm. Now, Mr. Holder did not like our Second Amendment Protection Act, and he sent us a very nasty letter, and I found it quite surprising. In fact, I almost passed coffee through my nose when I was reading it, because he cites in there, "Your law is unconstitutional." And I say to Mr. Holder, you better study the Constitution, something you obviously have not done. And that's evidenced by everything you're doing. Since we passed the Second Amendment Protection Act, 31 states have used our bill as a model and put it on the table in their state legislatures. And I gotta tell you, our friends to the east in Missouri, they doctored it up some and said, you know what? We're gonna add a few things. We're gonna tell you we don't care about the Gun Control Act of 1968. We won't follow it. And we're gonna tell you we don't like the National Firearms Act of 1939, and we're not gonna follow it. You gotta love it. Yeah. The federal tentacles have been reaching out for 100 years and getting into all manner of things that they have no right, no lawful business getting into. It is time to tell them enough.